Starting with myself, my name is Ndreu. I'm an electrical engineer. I've spent about the last 10 years or so designing very big buildings and infrastructure projects all around the world, but based with several different firms in New York City. I'm the COO at 10-6, so I'm the boots on the ground, as we like to say. I'm the guy who knows how the systems get wired together and how they're going to be maintained and operated and run on a daily basis. So my role is to really be more the technical interconnections between the grid, the building, and all the equipment in the middle. So 10-6, as we like to say, is a software company trying to optimize electrons. What we do is manage energy storage systems and use them to sell ancillary services back to the grid. Very specifically, we're focused on UPS systems and using those existing UPS systems to perform frequency regulation services for PJM, New York ISO, and New England ISO. So our proposition is that we really let the owners of these existing underutilized systems generate a new revenue stream that they would not normally have had access to, while we provide the best type of regulation available to the grid. So we're offering a premium service both to the grid and to the owner of the underutilized assets. We like to say we're the Airbnb of batteries, and that 99% of the time you're not using that spare bedroom or that UPS system, and with some slight modifications we can help you use it almost 100% of the time. Our big focus is in frequency regulation. So there's really two sides to our market. There's the grid side, and their pain point is that frequency regulation specifically and regulation services in general have become much more difficult to achieve. As intermittent generating sources like wind and solar become a much bigger mix of the energy being produced, the regulation issues become greater because you can, it's not easy to predict when those sources are going to be able to generate or not generate. It's not easy to tell when the sun's going to shine and exactly when the wind's going to stop blowing. In addition to that, there's a lot of different types of loads on the grid now that are turning on and off much more frequently than they ever did. So in general, for the grid operators, it's become very difficult to predict when small shifts in demand are going to happen, and that causes problems in regulating the frequency of electricity. So what we're providing is a very fast regulated service, a service that can respond in under a few seconds rather than under a few minutes, which is why it's paid a premium to do so. So that's the grid side. On the owner side, there's tons of existing energy storage systems there that are already installed all over the world. The one we're really focusing on is uninterruptible power supply systems, of which there are almost 25 gigawatts in the United States alone. And that's the equivalent of over 20 nuclear power plants. Those systems are typically bought as insurance policies, and they sit there unused almost their entire lives. So what our proposition is to use those existing energy assets that are out there sitting heavily underutilized to provide this very necessary service that they're extremely well suited to providing. So where 10-6 comes in is that we're the ones who manage that entire process. We'll manage the installation, the maintenance, the day-to-day activities of the UPS system, as well as manage the interactions with the grid operators, supplying power when they need it, taking a load off the grid when they need it, doing all the load following and the communication that's necessary, as well as all the payment back and forth that's necessary. So at the end of the day, we try and make a simple, transparent package for both the grid and the asset owner, so that the asset owner gets their check at the end of the month and doesn't have to worry about having their backup well maintained, because we're watching it all the time. And the grid operator gets a very fast reacting service very quickly and very cheaply. So there's a lot of different incentives out there from a lot of different agencies. I think the simplest one I can put out, which isn't really an incentive per se, but it is a mandated regulation by FERC, the body that regulates the grid operators in the U.S. That requires the equivalent of a 3 times preference for fast responding assets. Meaning, if you have one of these UPS systems, you get paid 3 times as much for the same amount of capacity as the guy with a normal system. So, your 3 megawatt UPS or your 1 megawatt UPS is the equivalent of 3 megawatts of normal natural gas generation or coal generation. So that is not an incentive per se, but right now it is an extremely good deal. And then there's tons of other energy storage incentives that could be bundled up with that. I think the best one I can think of is in New York City through Con Edison, which is offering $2,100 per kilowatt for energy storage systems that can help with peak shaving during the summer months. I think that's probably the best incentives I've seen anywhere. So, you're for $2,100 a kilowatt for a 1 megawatt system. Con Ed is paying for more than half of it, and they're doing that because they are spinning down their nuclear facilities, and it's critical to them to really have that 4-hour period during the day, during the summer only, where they can count on people being able to shave load. And then there's tons of other incentives through NYSERDA in New York State and through certain agencies in New York and through federal agencies and in California and Texas, all around the country really, for energy storage assets. And the particular mix will depend on the owner, and we're happy to work with any interested parties on what the best sort of advantage for them is, depending on where they're regionally located and what their business is. Sure. So there's always obstacle in implementing anything. The good news is that the federal regulators as well as the ISOs have all seen the need for this kind of service, PJM especially, and they have really made a very strong effort in modifying their rules and streamlining the process. I think the real barriers are not technical and not as much regulatory. I think the regulators really are trying to encourage what we're doing. The problems are much more cultural as far as how we're accustomed to setting up our grid, how we're accustomed to making infrastructure investments. So I think the biggest issue for us is that we're trying to sort of decentralize or change the old model of, I want an asset that does this, therefore I must invest $6 million in this asset that does only this and sits in a park somewhere 300 miles outside of the city. I think we're trying to overcome that mental barrier of why couldn't you have this asset that is used for multiple purposes, right? You can have a UPS system that also does peak shaving, that also does solar storage, that also does frequency regulation and black start. And I think that's where we're finding the biggest hurdle. I think the technical problems are very solvable. I think the regulatory problems are on their way to being solved, PJM being at the leading edge of that. I think the biggest issue is really going to be education and educating the customers as well as the local utility operators and everyone involved as to how we can make this future smart grid work. So we're at the stage right now where we're looking for pilot projects. So we're reaching out to folks that we've been talking to for the last couple of months and to see where it makes sense to get the first couple of megawatts in the ground. We've got our simulation for our network operating center, so our algorithms are up and running, and we've been putting historical data in and getting what we expect out. So the next step for us is to really get the first couple of pilot projects, hopefully in the New York, New Jersey area, up and in the ground. So we're hoping to have about 2 megawatts up and running by the end of the year. Actually, the most interesting thing I found out of the microgrid discussion was the discussion about the legal aspects of it, less so on the regulatory and government side, and more so on the contractual agreement side. For an investor to invest their money into projects like this, what sort of assurances would they need? And I thought that was very enlightening, because it's certainly a problem we've run into over and over again. And it really, I think, brought it to a head that it's a general problem in the industry, is figuring out, how we can arrange the terms equitably so that the risk is sort of shifted to the right people. How do you convince an investor that they should put up their money and let you do this, and that it's a good idea? And I think, like in many other businesses, a lot of that has to do with where we see the regulatory agencies making the rules, and where we see the rate schedules for utilities going in the future. So I think it was enlightening for me, because we've always known we're very dependent on that world, but I think it highlighted for me how really important it is to be in good contact with the agencies and the people sort of driving the rules forward for utilities.